Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Niger Innis Presents The Trump Revolution, a part of the TvAbraham network. Well, we have a real treat today. We are joined by Douglas Hamlin. Douglas Hamlin is an American publisher and businessman who has been in leadership of the National Rifle Association, the oldest and largest civil rights organization in our country. Uh, Doug has been in leadership since 2013 when he led the publishing division and saved, because of his actions, because of his leadership, saved the NRA over $30 million. Before that, Douglas served in the United States Marine Corps for 6 years before working in publishing. He worked for the Petersen Publishing Company, publishing Motor Trend and Guns and Ammo. Again, because of his reforms in the publishing division of the National Rifle Association, Doug was drafted to run for executive vice president of the National Rifle Association. And he successfully won and has been the executive vice president since 2024. Douglas, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Niger. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Douglas, you have a very interesting past and resume, but in particular, I want to ask you how the United States Marine Corps, your 6 years in the Marine Corps, helped serve you to make the dramatic reforms that you made within publishing and continue that reformist spirit as executive vice president of the NRA.
Great question, Niger. Just right off the top, when you talk about the National Rifle Association, founded in 1871, and the United States Marine Corps, founded in November of 1775, you're talking about two really great American brands. And we can learn a lot from our history and the traditions that come from these two great brands. The Marine Corps, I'll be just really direct. I got a lot more out of the Marine Corps than I think I was able to contribute. It was an organization that I needed at that time in my life, and the similarities between what I'm doing now at NRA and the hard lessons you learn as a U.S. Marine, I think they center on what we call endurance. And you're thrust into a group organization. You have young people that come from every state in the union, every color, every creed. And so as a young person, you all of a sudden get this exposure and you begin to build an appreciation for how abundant our nation is with talent and talented people. And then I get the high honor to be part of the National Rifle Association. I joined the staff here back in 2013, 2014. And then got the call to step up and be a candidate to be the executive vice president and the CEO. And I love my country, and I know how important NRA is to freedom in our country. And so it was something that I readily accepted, and I'm working really hard every day. And lessons learned in the Marine Corps are helping me do what I have to do here at NRA.
Fantastic. Well, Douglas, you have a great many victories and reforms that you've already made as executive vice president of the NRA, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, I want to give you and give ILA, the Institute for Legislative Affairs of the NRA, a great big shout out, a hoorah, if you will, because we have a nice little treat in that big, beautiful bill of Donald Trump's that just passed the House of Representatives by one vote. A suppressor piece of the National Firearms Act was removed. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that, about, I guess, the history of the National Firearms Act and the suppressor provision within that bill that was so onerous and that was just removed by legislation.
That's correct, Niger. I mean, first of all, huge shout out to President Trump. He's been very direct and consistent in his communication that he stands by law-abiding Second Amendment advocates like you and me, and he's putting his words into action through this Congress. And so last week the House passed its portion of the great big bill. Now it moves over to the Senate. And to your point, the National Firearms Act of 1934 restricted the use of suppressors. And as a result, law-abiding citizens like you and I have to go through a registry. We have to be fingerprinted. There's a $200 tax stamp that's affixed to anyone that purchases a suppressor. And there's literally several months of waiting for us to take possession of that product. That's the way it's been. And so what NRA advocated and our Institute for Legislative Action, which is the gold standard for political lobbying on Capitol Hill, our ILA guys led by a great executive director, John Comerford, he and his federal team, they worked day and night to get this language correct in the bill. And so now it goes to the Senate. We're hopeful that it will come through the senatorial process. There's a parliamentarian that will be weighing in on the specifics of the language. And so I'm optimistic, Niger, that you and I, as law-abiding citizens, will be able to go to our local gun store and purchase a suppressor just the way we purchase firearms. And
The Second Amendment doesn't say you have the right to keep and bear arms except suppressors.
that's right. And a nuance of the bill, and I want to mention this, is if I'm if I have a son, and I do have a couple sons, but if I have a suppressor and I own that suppressor, I can pass that on to my son or one of my sons without going through that onerous administrative registration process. I can transfer it just like I transfer a firearm. And so this is all part of what we want to do for our members, for our NRA members, and all law-abiding gun owners.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk again about some of the reforms that you have made since becoming executive vice president. The NRA was never a dear friend of the media, if you will, like other civil rights organizations have proven to be. We've always been on their wrong side from their point of view, which I think is leftist and biased, quite frankly. But in the last 10 to 15 years, we've come under more attack than we ever had been, not just by the establishment legacy media, but by the federal government, by the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, who's gone on a jihad against the National Rifle Association. Obviously, like any big organization, there are no perfect individuals, there are no perfect organizations, and there were some changes that needed to be made. I think that's was part of the big drive to get you elected executive vice president to help implement and make those reforms. Let's talk a little bit about some of the reforms you're most proud of that you have either already implemented or are in route of implementing for the National Rifle Association.
I, I'll just say it up front. I'm really optimistic for the future. NRA is getting back to our grassroots foundational programs and services, our outreach, and we're hiring right now. And this is happening for the first time in 6 years. COVID had a lot to do with some of the reduction in staff because people couldn't congregate. So, for example, our clubs and associations, those folks couldn't meet. And so we saw a steep decline in the numbers of active clubs. And so we're hiring people against community outreach so that they can recruit these clubs back. We're also hiring people against competitive shooting because when you think back to 1871, one of the foundational goals and objectives was marksmanship and to be able to adequately put rounds on target and do it safely.
Let me interrupt you because I really want to emphasize this. You know, a lot of folks like the stereotype of the NRA being an organization that was started by folk with a shotgun and a Confederate flag on the back of their pickup trucks. Just the reverse. The NRA was actually started, as you said, in 1871 by a group of Union generals and veterans of the Civil War that knew that Northerners were very much undermined by their inability to shoot straight and to maximize marksmanship in the same way that our Southern brothers and sisters were able to. And that was the principal reason that the National Rifle Association was started.
Uh, I'm so glad you brought that up, Niger. I mean, you and your late great father Roy understood that and promoted that. And when you and I'll we just coming we're coming off Memorial Weekend, and I had a good friend, Marine comrade, a Colonel George Aucoin was at Belleau Wood in France,
Hmm.
and the where I'm going with this is it's one of the great of many Marine battles, but it's one of the top three when you look at Marine history, and this is historians saying it, not me saying it. But the Battle for Belleau Wood is where two regiments of Marines went in and stopped the German assault and their push toward Paris. They were going for the knockout punch back in June of 1918, and
Wow.
Marine marksmanship was credited with turning the tide in that battle. And much of that marksmanship improvement came from changes that came from the National Rifle Association, assisting the training of our armed services and our armed service members. So,
That's
so
amazing. And that's not just Marine history, that's world history, because if the Germans under the Kaiser had captured Paris, France, World War One might have ended quite differently than it eventually did.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I'm going to, take a little. NRA is going to take a little bit of credit for changing the course of history there. But as far as the additional changes that we're making, so we're investing in competitive shooting, and we're also investing in education and training. And so NRA's got over 100,000 what we call NRA certified instructors across the United States. And if you're one of these first-time gun buyers that's come into the market over the last 5, 6 years, and you need to understand how to safely use and store that and maintain that firearm, you can go to NRA.org. You can type in your zip code and you can find an NRA certified instructor in your area so that you can get trained up properly. So these are the things we're doing to get back to the basics of what made NRA NRA.
Well, as I said before, Doug, and you know this, you've been through this as I have, and my father when he was alive as well. We were an unprecedented assault and attack by the New York State Attorney General and by the federal government under the Biden administration. We've come out of that battle. We have a couple of cuts, but we are intact and we have survived. So for those of my listeners and viewers who are not familiar, they may be familiar with the attacks on the NRA, but can you briefly discuss how it is that we survived and remained intact and remained full sovereignty over our organization?
Sure, I would be glad to. I was elected May 20th, 2024. You were there.
Yep.
And jumped on a red-eye flight, got back to NRA headquarters the next day. We were in Dallas, and I flew back to Fairfax, Virginia, and was in the office by 10 a.m. the next day. And within days, I was subpoenaed to appear in New York State Court.
My God.
And much of July of last summer, less than a year ago, I spent many days in the courtroom, and it was the same courtroom that President Trump was on trial.
Yes.
And the goal for the New York Attorney General, who brought this lawfare suit, was to dissolve the NRA. And if she couldn't dissolve the NRA, she wanted to put a monitor in charge of the NRA. And fortunately for us, we had in my opinion, this is me talking, a fair-minded Judge Cohen, and he decided no, that was not the case. That based on some of the other officers and my testimony, he felt that we could be, I'm just going to say it, we could be trusted to manage the affairs of the association independent of court supervision. Now, we're still registered in New York since 1871. So if we slip, if we fall, if we falter, there's a possibility that could change, but that's not going to happen on my watch. There will be no malfeasance on my watch. And the people that are on our board, like yourself, the staff here, are honorable people. They're hardworking people. We have nothing to hide. We're an open book. And so the lawfare was very damaging. We suffered over $1 billion in what we call negative publicity because, to your point, Niger, the mainstream media is not satisfied with NRA. They understand our political clout, and they're not in agreement with that. And but we've withstood a tremendous storm. And as I said, I'm very optimistic for the future. We're having a great day today. It's one day at a time in this business, but I believe that the future is bright.
I couldn't agree with you more, Doug. And on that note, we will conclude this intriguing interview. As I told your staff, your team, Allison, a big that a boy to Allison for helping facilitate this. I will more than likely be in Washington, D.C. at TvAbraham headquarters in a few weeks at the end of June. I would love the opportunity to continue this dialogue and to discuss in that interview your vision, even though we covered some of that today, but to bring it up again in our next interview in person in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us, Doug.
Thank you, Niger, for the opportunity. I look forward to seeing you in June.
Outstanding. Well, thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining another episode of Niger Innis Presents the Trump Revolution, a part of the TvAbraham network. We had the pleasure of having Doug Hamlin on, the Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association. And we're going to sign off as we always do. Doug, in our interview, brought up my late great father, great civil rights icon, Roy Innis, chairman of CORE for many, many decades. And he always said to me, Niger, I want you to live your life with TLC. And no, he didn't mean tender love and care, even though he gave me plenty of that, but he meant truth, logic, and courage. That was what his TLC stood for. That's what I try to stand for. I know that's what Doug stands for as well. And that's the entire platform of the TvAbraham network as well. God bless you all, and may peace be with you until next time.